How does someone learn to become a talented musician and then master the art of being a great band leader? And once you've done that, how do you break through? We'll explore the answer to those questions and beyond during this best of edition of No Wrong Choices, featuring critically acclaimed musician Allan Harris. We'll be back with new episodes in early February. I'm Larry Samuels, soon to be joined by my collaborators Larry Shea and Tushar Saxena. Before we kick off, we do ask that you support our work by liking and following No Wrong Choices on your favorite podcast platform. Now let's get started with our original setup of this great conversation. Larry Shea is the only member of this show with a music degree. You are undoubtedly the right person to set up this conversation, so take it away.
You know, every once in a while I have to pull out that music performance degree and show you guys, right? That I actually
Today's the day. This is your chance.
That's right. Next to the meteorological degree, I have the music degree. No, I did. I studied music in college, and it was a love affair of mine, and unfortunately I had to quit. It was drums, percussion specifically, but I played a lot of jazz music in college, pops bands, things of that nature, and it was a thrill, and it's something I miss to this day. Because of injury, I had to stop playing. So when you get an opportunity to talk to a professional musician like this caliber of player, somebody who was so dedicated to his craft and had to wear the business hat and the marketing hat and shred in his basement and figure out exactly how to master his instrument, it takes a lot of dedication, and I know there's a lot of people out there who are super interested in getting inside the mind of a professional musician. This is your opportunity, and it's pretty exciting to talk to a guy of this caliber.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, Shay, I mean, we're going to learn a lot about how this is not show friends, it's show business. I grew up listening to folks like Charles Mingus, Jack Teagarden, Wynton Marsalis. These are just a few of the names that kind of just pop into my head who have influenced me, and I still listen to this day. So the opportunity to listen to a man, to get to speak to a guy like Allan Harris is, it's not once in a lifetime, but it's a very rare opportunity to speak to an artist of this type of caliber, especially someone who is so high up in this in the field of jazz American standards. His mentors are who else but Tony Bennett. Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, giants in the field, giants who are so ingrained in the American standards book that, you can't think of a single song out there that these men have not at one point or another put on an album. And this is the type of caliber of artist that we're talking here today with Allan Harris.
Yeah. And, for me, as somebody who has seen him perform multiple times, I've heard him tell his story on stage. I'm now looking forward to hearing him tell his story on a podcast. So with that, here is Allan Harris. Now joining No Wrong Choices is the award-winning Harlem-based jazz R&B musician Allan Harris, who Tony Bennett once referred to as his favorite singer. Allan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me, guys.
So as a world-class musician, you always have that moment, that light that goes on when you're a child, perhaps, or you hear a piece of music or something magical happens. Do you have that magical musical memory from your childhood or something that pointed you in the direction of this career path?
I have a myriad of them, but one that really stands out, and I think is a little juicier than the other ones I have, is what age are we when we're, I can't remember, when you're 10 years old, what age is that? What grade is that when you're 10?
I want to say it's like fourth grade. Yeah, fourth or fifth grade.
Okay, it was around that time. I was about 10 years old. I was coming home from school, which was 2 blocks where I lived, with a Catholic school called St. Matthew's, and it was raining. And on my way home, I had to pass by a barbershop called Cook's Barbershop, and he cut all the kids of color hair in the neighborhood. And if you didn't have any money, what you do is sign a book, and you'd pay it. The parents would come in and pay at the end of the payday. He was a real wonderful guy. I remember walking, and they had a jukebox. It was a typical barbershop, very stereotyped, black guy sitting around reading newspaper, listening to records, and listening to a jukebox and pontificating on what was happening during that time in the late 60s. And as I walked past, I saw a life-size poster on the picture window of the barbershop, which you usually put things up there. And it was a man of color, tall and lean, in a light-skinned, buckskin suede jacket with fringes. He's playing a white Stratocaster, had a psychedelic headband, big fro, and he was looking out the poster, the picture had looking from behind, looking out over this sea of faces in this big field of white, black, yellow faces, didn't matter. And they all had their mouth open and dancing in the poster. And the top of it said, Jimi Hendrix live at Woodstock. And it just blew my mind, literally. Yeah, I know, it blew my mind. As I was sitting there, I'm listening to the music coming out because they were playing Purple Haze. And all these elder men of color in there were just bitching and complaining. I remember one of them said, I knew him when he was playing with King Curtis. Then he went over there to England and started to play that white boy shit, turned up the blues real loud. And I remember him throwing the album cover on the floor of the barber shop. And Mr. Cook came outside and said, come on inside, get out of the rain. And I picked it up and just studied it. And he said, you want this record? I said, yeah, I love it. I took it home and I wore that record out. And I think that was the impetus for me to really want to be an entertainer and a singer and a guitarist to the point that I am now.
But you're obviously you're a renowned jazz aficionado, a jazz vocalist, jazz guitarist, and Hendrix is a rock icon.
Right.
Did you initially say, okay, I want to be a rock god like Hendrix?
No, not really. It wasn't that I wanted to emulate him. I was enamored with him as everyone else was in all the genres during that time, whether it was Motown or country or jazz. Everyone was enamored with Hendrix, not because of his playing, because of what he brought to the table as a man of color in the industry. He was the first man of color that I looked at, and most people of color looked at as he didn't skin or grin. He wasn't sitting on a stump doing the blues, which I like, of course.
Yeah.
He didn't make any excuses about what he was on the stage. He just was a warrior on par with Clapton and all of them, with Jeff Beck, and he was just a monster to me. And it affected my psyche. It empowered me to venture into this world of music a little more strong than just being a wonderful jazz artist sitting behind a microphone doing standards from the songbook to people. He stretched the membrane in my mind.
So how did you get started? You had the inspiration, you had the vision, you had the role model, so to speak. How did you start?
My mother was a classical pianist. You know, she's from Hammond, North Carolina, and she moved to New York with her family, of course. It was a conduit, diaspora. Everybody, if you had money, it was during the Harlem Renaissance. If you had money, you sent it back home and to people, and who could ever make it back up north. They had a place to stay until they got on their feet. My mother was she was a recipient of that, plus being a prodigy. She was the first graduating class for performing arts. And she wanted me to play piano, and she was a strict tacticianer, believe me. Basically, she bordered on cruelty back in those days. And she really did. She wanted her son to be neoclassical. And I remember one time I was listening to a blues record, of Muddy Waters, and she freaked out. Said, I'm not going to have no son of mine sitting on them damn stumps singing that.
Muddy Waters she didn't want you to listen to.
Can you believe that? I know.
Oh, my God.
I know. But there was a foil. I had a person in the household who was her sister, who was a opera and blues singer. And I used to go upstairs to her place where she had the top floor and listen to her records. So anyway, she brought a friend of mine, Dwayne Morrison was his name. I remember in the third grade, he bought a guitar, and I didn't know how to play it, but I was enamored with it. And I used to go over his house and play Peter Gunn, doom, 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 and gyrate in front of the mirror in front of all my friends. And so my aunt, for my birthday, bought me a guitar, and she hid it upstairs because she wanted my mother to know that I had it. And after seeing that poster with Jimi Hendrix, it really prompted me to not just pick up the guitar and rock and roll, but just to study it more diligently until my mother found out about it. But that's another story.
I'm always fascinated with that. So you kind of, I mean, if you really do want to look at it, you did have the best of both worlds, right? Because you need the tactician stuff, the discipline, right, that your mom's classical training maybe gave you. And then you also had your grounded roots in, man, I just love this and I need to do it for my life, right? So you kind of did have the best of both worlds there.
Along with that moment of discovery, you know, picking up the guitar and empowering myself from just that one moment in the rain, looking at that picture on the window. I also had the benefit of spending weekends every now and then at my Aunt Kate's. My Aunt Kate had a soul food restaurant at the Apollo Theater, right around the corner from the Apollo Theater, called Kate's Soul Food. And if you Google or look up Jimmy Smith's album called Home Cooking, he's standing in front of it. And I'd go up there on Sunday with them. Back in those days, a kid had to, I don't know how you were raised, but I was basically my family's indentured servant.
Until the right was passed along to someone else.
You're right. You know the old adage that if they would give you, until you pay rent, until until your name is on a mortgage, just shut up. That's what it was.
That's it.
So I'd go up there, right. So I'd go up there with my aunt and some other relatives, my mother, for Sundays. It wasn't called brunch at that time. I don't know where that name came in the fold, but as for people of color, it was just called going to eat on a Sunday afternoon. And I would go up there with them and sit there on one of the stools and watch a myriad of stars come and get their food between their shows. Because back then, stars performed the Apollo, and they did 5 shows a day.
Wow. That's a
and
lot.
I know. And children got in matinees on Sunday for free. So before the call came for me to go with them next door to the Apollo, see the matinee, I would sit there and watch Sarah Vaughan or one of the Temptations come in, or Duke Ellington would come in, and they all have robes on or whatever, Jerry Butler, Clyde McFadden, and they get their favorite dish that my aunt knew what they wanted and cooked for them. They take it back to their dress rooms, which I never was privy to. And I just was enamored with that. And then couple that with me going to see them an hour later and seeing the same person I saw in their hair wrapped up, because everyone conked their hair back then, in robes. I'd see them in these silk, unbelievable outfits and ruffled shirts singing these Motown songs, or Sarah Vaughan would come out, or Ella Fitzgerald. So I had that to straddle the rock and roll influences that I was going through.
Allan, can you run through? So you mentioned Ella Fitzgerald.
Mm-hmm.
Can you run through a list of the people that would come through that would blow our minds?
Well, what blew my mind? I can just take it just from a child of 10 or 12, which I was at the time, and what perked my interest. And I can't speak for your audiences, but maybe I'm sure there's something they can glean from it. One of the few of the artists that really blew me away was Jackie Wilson, for one. Seeing Jackie Wilson perform was just something out of a Cirque du Soleil going at a chicken shack. He was just amazing what he did with his voice and everything. Little Anthony Imperials, of course, The Temptation, and then you would see maybe Arthur Prysock or Jerry Butler, or I never got to see Sam Cooke. That was a little bit before my time, And what else? This is in my mind even to this day. My mother's not with us anymore, but I remember sitting there a half an hour prior to walking around the back of the restaurant to go to the Apollo, because we went in the back way, because she knew them. I remember my mother, my aunt, and all the other women who were in that little bevy with them let out a scream that was almost something from the Lawrence of Arabia. It was pretty daunting. Now you got to bear in mind, I'm watching this woman who's very neoclassical, graduated from performing arts, very stoic in that. I'm watching her lose her mind and scream, and they scream, "Oh, Marvin!" And Marvin Gaye walks in.
Oh my God!
I know. It was unbelievable. My mother turned into like a 13-year-old little girl on the banks of the banks of the Mississippi in Memphis somewhere. I couldn't believe it. My mother, she was actually, they were gone. Oh my God, Marvin Gaye! They were screaming. My mother, this is my mother. Like I said, the woman who used to whoop my butt. I was just blown away.
Who never wanted you to listen to Muddy Waters. Marvin Gaye was her kryptonite.
That was okay. That was okay.
Go figure. You know what I mean? I know. How dare she? How dare that woman? How dare she? But I remember, but this was really funny because my father was a very upright guy. Remember, he came from Pennsylvania. He did rodeo and that. My father was wild, and he was from that ilk of machismo stuff. he respected my mother, but she knew what boundary to cross. I remember going in the subway home with her, and I looked over and I said, "Ma, wow, Marvin Gaye, you really like him?" And I could tell she was getting her headset together before she walked into the house with me. And she turned to me and she says, "I have no idea what you're talking about, young man. Let's go home."
Never happened.
I know, yeah. I caught the vibe right then. I said, "Okay,
Yep.
all right, Ma."
There are certain things that are off limits at all
it.
times for kids. That's for sure.
That was it.
So, Allan, I guess my question would be, when did you start to take things seriously and really start to work at it? Like when did this become a craft that you were really honing?
I think I was 16 years old. Matter of fact, I know. I knew. I was 16 years old, and I was in Pittsburgh at the time because my family had moved there because my grandfather has a farm there, and we took it over. And I used to go into Pittsburgh when I was 16 and be involved in a lot of jam sessions. And I was mentored by this incredible drummer named Roger Humphreys. And Roger Humphreys played with George Benson. He played with Stanley Turrentine. He was one of those journeymen who toured for a long time. And he got a family, and he stayed in Pittsburgh and taught. And he just really schooled a lot of young wannabe musicians, yours truly. And I remember I was in a band with him, and he let me get on stage, and I started to sing a few songs and play the guitar, and he stopped in the middle of the song. It was a crowded evening, not there to see me, but to see him, and he let youngsters come up. As a matter of fact, one of the guys who was in the band is a friend of mine, known for 30-something years, maybe 40 years. He's a bass player here in town called Leon Dorsey. Would you know him?
No,
okay.
no,
Anyway,
don't.
all right, he's an old friend of mine. He teaches at Berkeley. Anyway, I remember being on stage with him, and we went. He said, he called out a standard, which I didn't know, but I was faking it. I figured I was playing a little bit of R&B riffs on the guitar. He stopped, and 30 seconds into the song, just stopped the whole band in front of a crowded house of crowded people on a Saturday night. And he said, "Boy, you need to get off the stage." I said, "Huh?" He said, "You need to learn the melody and learn the song. And then when you learn your craft, then you can come back." And I literally slinked off the stage, I remember. I did. I left my chords and one pedal. I had a wah-wah pedal and a big muff. I left it there and came back 2 days later to get it. And it took me a lot of courage to do that. That was a turning point where I really got serious. I really did. Because I sought out those instrumentalists who played with him, and they had a lot of I wouldn't say they had sympathy for me. Basically, they felt sorry what had happened that night because it was pretty demonstrative. Even the crowd felt bad, but Roger Humphrey was that way, and to this day he laughs about that. He's 80 now, and I love him. See him in Pittsburgh all the time, and I remember that was my first foray into really becoming serious, not just on my guitar, but serious in my vocal prowess. And that was a turning point.
That's pretty amazing. Every musician has that train wreck moment or that moment of trepidation of you're like, "Oh my God, I can't believe that just happened." And here you had it so early on in your career, the courage to get back up on that stage or to go and find the real book and study those jazz standards, right? And get those under your belt.
Exactly.
Must have taken, some real moxie from a 16 or however old you were kid back then, because that's a devastating moment at that point.
It was more than devastating. It was life-changing. And there was a moment there, I think it was maybe a month after that. It took me a month to really recover from that. As I remember, I didn't even touch the guitar for 3 weeks. And I was pretty sullen. I think what pulled me out of it was friends that I had been playing with who, they were in a band, they were doing Earth, Wind, and Fire and stuff like, that ilk. And a couple of the members in the band had played with Roger every night in a jam session. And they were the ones that were very sympathetic to me. And as I heard you mention the real book. One of them did give me the real book. They gave me the real book. And I remember going through it and learning the chords and learning the notation of it. And just sitting in my bedroom by myself and going through these songs. I said, I'm going to learn 10 songs and go back and just knock Roger out, which I did. I learned, I went back maybe 2 months later, and he made me wait an hour and a half before he called me up. Literally, he knew what he was doing. He
Lesson.
he knew human psyche. He really did.
Yeah, yeah.
I had to give him credit. And he waited an hour and a half, and he said, "You gonna come do a song? What are you gonna do?" And I remember it was, oh God, what was it? I can't remember now. You Go to My Head.
Yes.
You go to my head. You go to
Sure.
my head. And I sang it really straight Nat King Cole-ish sort of style. And that was the turning point for me, because not only did he welcome me into his little fold of artists who sat at his feet, he gave me the impetus and the courage to go further into this thing called music.
That's beautiful, because we talk on the show all the time about those turning moments, right? Because it could have gone a lot different. If you got up on stage and he didn't teach you that lesson that, hey, you better know this melody, because we all know the melody, right? We all know what's supposed to happen up here. And so at this point in your life, you're shredding, right? Like you're like sitting in your house, like doing everything you can to get up to speed with where you think you need to be as a musician.
Mm-hmm. I know. I was, until I met that wall that we all meet.
Sure.
There is a wall that everyone meets, and I met this wall, and it didn't deter me. I didn't smash into the wall. I didn't go around it or leap over the wall. I remember standing in front of it and really analyzing what it is I need to do to become one of those bricks in the wall, because I'm not going to get through it. And our case in point was, it was 1975, and I had gotten an album from a guitar friend of mine by a guitarist named Pat Martino. And it was a record called Joyous Lake, and he was in town, a little boutique guitar shop that sat only 30 people. And I'd go in all the time and play Les Pauls and Stratocasters. And once a month, they would have special guests come in, and they clear out the whole front of the store out, have tables and chairs, and they'd have an artist come and play, whoever it was. And I remember Pat Martino was there. My wife, for a birthday present, surprised me and bought me tickets for it at that time. 75. I was dating her. And I went, and that was a turning point for me, because I realized I'm never going to become that guitarist. I'm going to be, I'm not going to be a George Benson, a Pat Metheny, or Pat Martino. I'll understand what they do a lot of practice. I could play a few songs on stage, but I'll never become that regimented and that genius on that level. But I can immerse myself into what they do and find out what I'm about. And that's what helped me.
At what age was this, roughly?
That age, I was 20. I was 20 years old at that time, 21.
All right, so roughly in your early 20s, did you say to yourself at some point, okay, I want to go from being a member of the band to being the leader of the band?
Well, the leader of the band happened not by wrote, or it didn't happen because I planned it or set out a goal. That's what I want to be. I became leader of the band because my synopsis in getting things done, coming from the background that I have with my mother and also my grandfather, we didn't even touch upon that, but I will. My grandfather, his training when I was 12 to 15, working with him in the field, in the barn, and whatever. He what is the term? Something no fools. What is it? Sweat no fools. What's the term?
He doesn't suffer
He
any
didn't
fools?
suffer any fools, and he laid that on me. And he'd always.
I use that line all the time with people.
My grandfather loved it. He had about.
I hate when he does that.
He had 4 lines, but that was a major one. The other one was, "Do as I say, not as I do." Or there's this one.
Yep.
This famous one was this: "There's 3 ways to do things, son. The right way, the wrong way, and my way."
I use that one too.
So I come from a background of that, where you put your nose to the grindstone. When you're in the 20s, you're not really serious, but let me say, I was thankful to be surrounded by my peers who were that age, who were serious. My friend Leon Dorsey, I remember he was going to Oberlin. Another friend was going to Duquesne. Another guy, he's going to Berkeley. So I was surrounded by those my peers who did play R&B and blues and rock with me, but who ventured into jazz, and they came back with such a knowledge of their instrument that not only did I become jealous, I became shameful at times playing with them because I wasn't up to their speed. And because I noticed how they would take I was I was trying to learn this song "Fragile" from Yes on the Yes album, "Close to the Edge," and a guitar player friend of mine who 3 years prior to that I could burn him. I was just getting on stage and burn him because of his acumen at going to school, learning theory, and that playing jazz. He came back and just said, "Oh, Allan, this is what Steve Howe's doing." I said, "What the fuck?" So that scared me. I said, if it just in a matter of 3 years, he could propel himself from the arena, just being on stage with me in bell bottoms and big hair, and we're just jamming to Earth, Wind and Fire and shit like that, and just his association and studying the jazz real book, whatever, you take him along that line. I better get into bed with these guys. And that,
yeah, you wanted some of that, of course.
I wanted some of that, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So they brought you forward.
They brought me they didn't brought me forward. They kicked me forward. They kicked me forward because they were speaking a language that that school and letters gave you that I was lacking. My ear was up to par, of course, and my antics on stage was wonderful. I knew a lot of songs and that, but because of their knowledge they were well read and versed in jazz at their age. Playing the album Trey Hombres or something from Machine Head from Deep Purple was nothing for them.
So, Allan, you're surrounded by this incredible talent. You've had so many, great influences up to that point. When did you start to break through? Like what was that moment and what did that look like?
I wasn't cognizant of it, believe me, because when you're 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, all you're thinking about is, do you look good on stage, and how's that little girl down there in the front row looks? You know what I mean?
The important stuff, of course.
The important stuff,
The whole reason you do it.
Right, exactly. Exactly. But what was the question again? So I don't want to go off the...
Well, when did you start to break through? When did the momentum of your career kick in?
When I started to learn some of these standards, and I noticed that the crowd that I was used to playing to, my buddies, young crowd, whatever, the crowd started to be saturated more with people who were a little more well-read. Instead of me reading Tolkien, they would bring. I was in the company of people in the audience who were reading Isaac Asimov and Herman Hesse and Siddhartha, who also knew who John Coltrane Love Supreme was, and who also knew what Electric Ladyland was, as well as Trey Hombres. It was remarkable, the journey that opened up for me, the world that opened up for me, just from learning how to just becoming a little more well-read in my genre. So that was a turning point.
You have a great quote that you said, "I'm a storyteller through the genre of jazz." Was it always going to be jazz? Because it sounds like, as Tushar alluded to earlier, you have influences from everywhere, the Jimi Hendrix stuff and, your mom's classical stuff. Was it always going to be jazz?
When I was younger, jazz to me was boring because I didn't understand it. Right. I didn't understand it. And when you don't understand something, either you run away from it. Fortunately for me, I was good in so many other genres that there was a while where I just turned my back on jazz. I figured, I don't know, jazz, whatever, Sly and Family Stone, whatever, I'll just get into that, whatever. Until I started my peers, my group started to be selective. I hungered for more knowledge, not just on the stage and not just with music, just with events. People who were well-read came to my arena and introduced themselves, who were my age and who played their instruments just as well as I did. But they had something I didn't have. They had a knowledge of self through self-awakening, which I didn't know at that time at age 20. I was just still feeling my oats and looking trim and whatever. And that perked my interest because I went on tour, a mini tour with a couple of guys that I had really, I was enamored with them. And they took me to a resort to make some money. And at that resort that I was at, where we played 5 nights a week. They fed us. We had a hotel room. It was near the water, the beach. It was great. But that resort was full of a lot of people. It wasn't your typical Club Med, Walt Disney sort of people, you know. The resort catered to a clientele whose children went to Brown, William and Mary, you know, Columbia University. They were children and people who were there at the resort who not only were well read, but they were well versed in a lot of things that enhanced the mind. And I don't say I was jealous. I was intimidated by them. I really was. And that spurred me on to read, not just read more, but just to learn my instrument more than just listening and copying Jimmy Page licks or Herb Ellis licks or George Benson licks. I started to find out that through self-awareness and reading, I could develop my own sound, which I never really thought I could. And that was a big turning point for me.
Allan, I want to kind of, you touched upon it just a moment ago, the notion of life on the road. And I kind of want to touch on that a little bit. Like this idea of first of all, as a young musician, life on the road, obviously, and life on the road for any musician is a big key to obviously getting your name out there and honing the craft, etc. But how has that transition now been as you have gone through your musical life? The notion of being on the road, is it easier now? Is it harder now? Was it much easier as a younger man, or tougher as a younger man?
It was. That's a double-edged question. I think it was easier when I was younger because ignorance is bliss. You know, when you're young and you're just feeling your oats, you're just out there in the pasture, just running wild. You know, as I got older, I started to look at other things other than just being on the road and having fun, and having a drink and looking at pretty girls and where we're gonna go tonight. There's a jam session down. We're in Philadelphia doing a show or Washington D.C.
I mean, the lifestyle is totally different. The lifestyle is totally different.
It is totally different. Definitely is. And because of that, now that I'm older, the road to me now is a series of growth coupled with just reuniting with old friends that I've garnished through the years. You know, and I go see them and I see how they moved on with their lives, children, houses, whatever. And they come to my shows, whatever town I'm in. And I have that experience. I'm an older guy now. And when I'm off the stage, we have dinner. I'm just going back and we're all talking about what we've been doing between not seeing each other. So the road is different for me now. Unfortunately for the younger guys in my band, I'm learning to let them run free because some of the guys in my band are 15 years younger than me and that. And they don't understand why after the gig, I just want to go back to this friend's house out in the country, you know, and they don't want to go with me. Oh, well, Allan, you know, there's a jam session downtown Philadelphia. We want to go, you know, and there's a lot of chicks there. I said, okay. All right, well, I'm going to go. You know, they got this wonderful malt. They got this, whatever, 60-year-old malt liquor, whatever it is there, and they want me to try out, and then we go to their house, and we're just going to talk. So the road is different for me now. It is. It's fun, but it's different.
So you have, you know, you get that first experience at that gig, and do you start gigging right away, you know, piecing it together with friends? Is it friends that are, hey, I need the vocalist, I need a guitar player, let's come along, there's another tour and another tour? Or were there gaps? And was it hard to piece together that lifetime of music that you put together? I mean, that couldn't have been easy. No, it's hard. It's hard if you aren't selfish with your talent. And let me explain that. I don't want to seem to come off as so Dostoevsky here. It's hard when you have a myriad of your close friends who you know,
you young guys hanging out, you're playing music, blah, blah, blah. He's dating this chick, you're dating that chick. And it's hard when you develop past them. You develop past them musically. But your heart is still with them as friends. And nothing's more than having to tell a fellow musician that they're really not good enough to travel this road with you anymore. That's the hard part. That's the really hard part. And I admire artists who can do that without harming the friendship. When you're young, you don't have to worry with all that. You just say, look, I'm just going to move on. And that was the hardest thing, because I still have, I run into friends from those days who come to my shows every now and then. Now they're older, they have children, they've gone back to school and become lawyers, whatever it is. And I see they had that longing look from the audience when I look at them, that look of there go I but for the grace of God, and also, but then you can also tell behind that clouded look, there's also a little resentment of how I treated them at that time, because I was young. And how do you tell someone when you're 20 years old that, it's like leaving the girlfriend or the girlfriend dropping you, when you moved on, because it's all about growth with music or with the arts. When you find a group of another entourage, a group of people, another mentor, another whatever it is, and you're going to grow, you have to make a hard choice in looking behind over your shoulder. And those who can't grow with you, either you die with them in the sand or you move on across that hill, which I did many times. I'm still doing it now.
So Allan, as a part of that, as you pushed on to that next phase, how did you develop a stage presence? What became your style? Who were your mentors as you developed your presence?
There was a number of them, and there's a fence that separates some of them. I mean, there's a fence. There's the Americana. Well, it's called Americana now. It wasn't back then, which enveloped rock and roll, blues, a little bit of soft country, folk, and of course R&B and funk. I mean, that was that one side of it. The other side was the serious side was jazz, and I started to look at the artists in both genres and all those genres, and I started not to emulate them, but to find out, why does someone like Oscar Peterson, why would someone sit there for 3 hours and watch the Grateful Dead or Robert Plant sing Stairway to Heaven? Or I started to look at what it is that they are doing, not to just capture their audience and to enthrall them, that people really can let's sit in a chair and listen to that record and go into another world. What is it? And it's telling a story. And I had no idea what that was. And bear in mind, I'm 25, 26, going on 30. I had no idea what telling the story was. I just figured you get on stage, you gyrate, if you play your acts, you sing the song, you do all your machinations with your band, and boom, you put on a great show and people clap, sweat, and that's it. But I realized that you have to repeat that night after night, which is why a lot of groups burn out and they change members in the band or they just walk away. They just say, like Joe Perry from Journey. He just said, "Fuck it." Excuse my language. Oops. Sorry, I'm not supposed to. Okay.
It's all right.
Quite all right.
It's all right.
We put in we check the E
Okay.
for explicit.
Say what-
episode. So whether you swore or not, it was getting an E.
Okay, good. All right. Well, and you
All
look
good.
at some of these. Look at some of the, like Barry Sanders from the Detroit Lions, the halfback. When you look at people who are at the top of their game, when you looking at it from afar in the audience viewpoint, you say, why was my favorite group? Why did they break up? And you realize that it's a growth period. Because after a while, you become, which is why I admire the Stones. They're doing the same thing for 40 years over and over again. I don't know how they do it, but anyway, that's another story. You get to the point where it's not that you become bored with what you've done, what's made you hit, or why the audience comes see you. It's just that where you were 5 years ago with the audience, they're still there, but you've grown. You've grown. The audience doesn't know that. They're still back in what they've heard you do 5 years ago, and you did it well, and they want you to do it over and over again. And you have a choice. Either you find out how to grow and take your audience with you, or you become bitter, disband your band, and just wander from show to show, and next thing you know, you're doing Las Vegas or whatever. You know. So did I answer that a little bit?
Do you have a trick of the trade, so to speak, for how you connect? Like when you walk in a room, is there something you do that grabs everybody right away that you've learned over the years?
Well, when I'm on stage, the first thing I do is, before I'm even on stage, is I study the arena or the environment that I'm going to play in. Because I make sure, and I'm adamant about that, I make sure that my band, as well as myself, get there way before the start time. And I've had band members, young of course, who bitch about that. Oh man, the gig is at 7:00. Why you get here at 6? Because we need to feel the flavor of the room. I need to feel what kind of room.
An hour before they're bitching about that? Get out of here.
Yeah, you'd be surprised. And I said, you need to flavor the room. And they said, why? Well, it might be raining outside. The parking lot might be muddy, and people are mad because they got to walk through the mud to sit down. Or it might be a Thursday night, and the regular staff that they used to come seeing at the club isn't there. They have a substitute staff. Or, and this has happened to me in my early development in my career, maybe it happened just recently, they might be expecting another act and get there and find out that that act is substituted by me. And maybe a third of the people know who I am, 2/3 don't. So you have to actually read the audience way before you get on the stage. And I hang in the wings and I listen to their conversations. I listen to how and I tip one of the head waiters and I tell them, come backstage every once in a while and give me a check on what's happening. Let me know who's disgruntled. Let me know who's, who I need to look out for in the audience, and just give me a feel of the playing field. And you become real good at that after a while. And you get to a point where I'm at now where I don't even need to do that. I can tell immediately when I get there the whole energy level of the place through the workers, through the staff, the sound crew, the roadies. I know I know the flavor of it. And on that mark, I alter my show to that. What show I might have done last night at Idaho Falls, at Idaho, whatever, Sioux Falls. Here I am in Des Moines, Iowa the next day, and it might be a different type of crowd. So I might do the same show, but I might have to alter the songs because they are not ready to hear Happy Song on the first set. It's a goddamn blizzard outside. The corn crop ain't coming.
That's right.
The truck pull was canceled because the ground froze over. And Trump lost.
Oh boy.
Right. So you got to alter the show. But that comes into play of you telling your story. You telling the story and knowing what it is you're going to say, not just coming out there and becoming just the monkey with the organ grinder. And that took a while, and I'm still learning that now, believe it or not. I don't think you ever get, you never actually learn. It's like crossing the Rubicon. You can't go back after a while. You got to keep learning and learning your story.
So do you find a bigger difference between, because obviously you've traveled around the globe to many different audiences. So do you find a bigger difference between American audiences and how receptive they are to you as compared to audiences in Europe, in Asia, in the Middle East, etc.?
Of course. And the big difference is this. We as Americans are haughty. And I'm not talking about arrogance. I'm not talking about bitching. I'm talking about we are haughty. And rightly so. Because the majority of the music that we play has been formulated here, whether it's whatever your background, whether it's Gershwin or whether it's British rock or just bunch of ex-slaves in the field hollowing blues or whatever it is. It's an amalgamation of all of us in this music called jazz, R&B, and country. It is ours. Old mentor of mine, very wise man who really was a great vocal coach, told me that this music that we have, this American music, whether it's jazz, whatever, is our gift to the world. So we carry that with us. Even people who don't know a damn thing about music, but they go to a concert. The American audience has almost a psychological chip on his shoulder, and rightly so, not to the point where we beat our chests. We are the best. Let's go. Make America great again. I keep going into that. I don't know why. We'll talk about that in a minute. That's a different
That's
podcast.
a different
Thank you.
podcast.
Yeah. Pull me back, please. Pull me back. Pull me back from the shore. Pull me back. I know we're going that one.
I'll get.
Yeah. Unlike most audiences, and I'm talking about from south of the border to our European, to our Mediterranean folk, to Russia, to Japan, the American audience takes it for granted that this is our music. This is our music, and it is, rightly so. It's our birthright as Americans. But on that note, there's a very, I wouldn't say ugly side. There's a very demonstrative side to us when you play for an American audience. American audience, you have to prove something to them. You really have to prove something to American audiences. Where audiences around the world, they're just happy to see you. Just play American music. Just play, and it's refreshing. But you have to come back to the American audience just to get a reality check. Because the American audience, we are so tainted. We had Elvis, we had Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Jimi Hendrix. I mean, everyone from Jeff Beck to whatever, from what's his name, the blind opera singer from Italy. I know, but you know what I'm talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly.
Everyone emulates us. Everybody emulates us, but we take it for granted, and so do we who are on the stage, who are telling stories. But when you go overseas for a while, which is why you see a lot of expats who are musicians who say, "I'm leaving America. The hell with it. Not treat me. I'm a black guy. I get better treatment in Europe. I'm going over there." After about 4 or 5 years, they come scurrying back. Oh God, I'm so glad to be back home. Didn't you like Europe? Oh, Europe was wonderful. It was wonderful. We went everywhere. They treated us so right. But I need the grit. I missed America's grit. That's what it is. And
So we're already great. Is that what you're suggesting? Sorry, different podcast.
Yeah.
So, Allan, I kind of want to just touch on one thing you said a moment ago about the lifestyle and how tough it is to be a musician. Like you said, this is not a profession for the faint of heart. But obviously you were mentored. You were obviously mentored, and you said a moment ago you have been mentored by many musicians on your coming up. Do you take that responsibility, or how do you take that responsibility now as obviously a senior member of the profession now? Do you want to be more of a mentor to younger musicians? Do you want to be a hands-on, or do you want to be more of an aloof person, an aloof kind of mentor?
No, I have to be. Whether I want to be or not, I'm like dragged into it. I'm dragged into this foyer, this position of being a mentor, whether I want to or not. Why do I say that? Because I'm very disenchanted and I'm very upset with what I see young artists have to experience to make their way financially that I didn't have to do. And let me reiterate. Let me expand upon that a little bit. I was sitting here during the pandemic, right before the pandemic, and they had the Grammys on, and they had there was a song that won the Grammys with Minaj, what's her name, and
Nicki Minaj
and Megan Stallion. That's her name, and it was called
Megan Thee Stallion. Yeah,
the WAP. That was the song, and I don't know if I.
Yeah, I think so. WAP.
Yeah,
WAP,
and you know what it stands for, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I saw, okay, I said, okay, they were going to make a dime, they're making millions, which is cool. I'm not hating. But then I saw the performance that they did on stage. And if you saw it, it was, I wish I had a dollar bill. I don't go to strips and clubs, but it was similar to that. And
but that's what it felt like.
Not just did it win a Grammy, it influenced a myriad of young artists who watched that, who figured that that's what the direction I need to go into. in order for me to make money and to make my mark, which was just pap, in my opinion. And because of that, I have younger musicians in my band who every once in a while, they'll, in their free time on the tour bus, they'll play something that I'll have to turn and look at them and I feel like I'm my grandfather at these moments, where and my musicians are very schooled. Some of them come from Rutgers and Berkeley and New School and Manhattan School of Music. They're very schooled, but there's something that has seeped into the psyche of the youngsters now that I didn't have happen to me. And that is, in order to make money, they will do anything, which really is unbelievable, because I'm looking at these young purveyors of my craft who are well-read, well-traveled, because they're on the road with me, and who can play their ass off on their instruments, who are bopping up and down to these songs. I don't know a thing about, using the N-word or whatever. So I've almost taken it upon myself to not to guide them, but just to show them that what it is that we as Americans have gotten to this point where yes, there was civil rights, yes, there was racism, yes, Jim Crow, yes. But underneath all that, there still was self-worth that you had inside your house, and I try to tell my musicians that even when you're on stage, there's certain.
And you feel like some of that's faded.
Not just faded. It's being done. It's being washed over like with a tsunami of. My niece said something to me that just encapsulated this, and she said it to me, and I use it all the time. I had an argument with her. She's 22 now, and she said this when she was 16, and she doesn't remember it. Which, when you're 16, you don't remember what you said when you're 22, of course. And I remember I was arguing with her, and she's playing this. I forgot what music it was. It was blaring at 11 o'clock at night. I ran upstairs. She was staying with me for 10 days. And I said, look, Danielle, you got to turn that shit off, please, just for a minute. And I was going to take her to a club that we were performing tomorrow, And I said, you really got to turn it off. And she got mad, slammed the door. And I said, oh, come on. So I opened the door and I said, look, we need to talk. She said, turned to me and sucked her teeth and said, Uncle Allan, if you're so damn smart, why aren't you really rich? And she slammed the door on me. Bam. Wow. Yeah, that was deep. That was deep. Which gave me a focus into what the youth now is exposed to, whether the Kim Kardashian thing, the Kanye West, whatever. That is their whole mantra, their whole pillar of worth. Your worth in your youthful society that you roam in is based upon how much money can you accrue, no matter how.
Yeah, your wallet. Your worth is your wallet.
And it doesn't matter how you get it. Doesn't matter how you get it. It's
such an important conversation. It is frightening.
It's
so
frightening.
Let's put the bow on that, though.
Okay.
How do you break through and help that younger generation? Because I know there's a younger generation right now listening to this podcast who wants to be a great musician and have the career that you've been able to have over the course of your life. So how do you break through? What do you say to that be the mentor? What do you say to that person who is kind of lost with today's society, with what music is doing to young people today? What do you say or do?
You have to expose them you have to spend time with them instead of just turning your back and saying, oh, shit, you never, whatever, do what you got to do. You have to spend the time with them and expose them to the things and the lessons and the rules of thumbs that we had to live under for a minute. Of course, they're not as tough-skinned as we were, because they weren't. I mean, when we were growing up, I don't know how old you guys are. I can't say.
We're all right around 50.
When you were growing up, it wasn't about. You had to go help your uncle. You had to wake up, and you didn't sit at the table with a phone up to your ear, and you had to whatever. And that's just an example. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I learned you can't shout at these kids. You can't tell them this is what you need to do.
We were indentured servants, just like you. Just so you know.
Yes, you were. That's right, man. Yeah, you were.
And mine was in the form of delivering pizzas, but it was the same concept
exactly.
for sure. Mowing lawns, delivering pizzas, but we all worked. We all worked our butts off coming up.
You said yes. You got a star.
I got no star.
I didn't get
Not a single
star. I don't. If I came in second. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't follow that. No participation points,
Not a
no
single
participation
star.
trophies,
Look, I came in
no
second
stars.
place, and
Yes.
well, look, I
Why weren't you in
yeah,
first?
really.
Exactly.
That's what
Yeah.
I got. I'd come home with a 90. Why
right,
didn't you get a
yeah, you know,
95? It was not good. It was never a good
never.
job. It was what's
It's
next.
amazing, isn't it?
But spend
It's
time with them.
amazing.
That's a great answer. I mean, you got to spend the
It
time,
is.
like
have
you
to spend
said. Yeah.
But you have to gird your loins because being at the age that we are, spending time with them, you have to waddle through a lot of their youthful stuff that is really, woo. I mean,
Well, Alan, now that you have perspective, and you've done so much, as you look back across your career, we obviously did our research coming into this conversation. We've all seen, across the river, et cetera, et cetera. Of your big projects, what are you the most proud of? If you're able to single things out, what would you single out?
it's like one of those elevator questions, huh?
Do you have a favorite
Yep.
child? So to speak?
I know it's a tough
well, it's
question.
not just tough. It's I because at the moment of time that I did each and individual project, that's where my headset was at that time. Now there is maybe one or two. I'll narrow it down to one that even though I'm in this place where I'm at now, emotionally and mentally, it still resonates with me. I think Cross That River is the one. Cross the River is the one. Musically is not as adept as my others, of course, but what it's saying, I think it reflects my attempt to empower those, especially children, not just children of color, empower children who don't know about that history, that one part of the history of Black America, which is the diaspora from the West, from the South to the West. Everyone knows from the South to the North, of course, but no one knows from the South to the West, which, in my opinion, was just as tantamount and just as important as that. And I try to bring that out in the show that I do.
Yeah, which we've all seen online, and it's fantastic. I've seen you perform live a couple of times. I have not seen you do that, but I've certainly greatly enjoyed watching you perform. So, Alan, as we look forward, we've talked a lot about the past. What's next for Allan Harris?
I'm going on to, well, just encapsulate real quick. I'm heading to Europe for the holidays, Italy and Turkey, and I'm doing some with the BBC Orchestra. I'm doing a tribute to that. I'm narrating and singing with the BBC Orchestra, a tribute to Charlie Mingus, which is pretty daunting.
Oh, it's great.
Oh,
Yeah,
wow.
it's
Charles
pretty
Mingus,
crazy.
wow.
I did it earlier in the year, and it came off really well. But now I have my teeth sunk into it. I've had months to really bury my heart into it, so I'll kill it. And I have that. Then I come back in January. I gather my band together, and we do a Cross the River tour, interspersed with some jazz stuff,
Oh, wow.
From February 3rd until the beginning of April. I'm doing a whole thing from Cleveland to Lafayette, Louisiana, from Texas. So I'm starting that. Why? Because I'm prepping myself. I just got 5 weeks at 59th Street Theater.
Oh, wow.
I did. It just happened
no
2
kidding.
days ago. They want me to go in there.
Congratulations. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah. And so I'm not just revamping the show. I have the artists now that I have performing with me on this tour are more adept at what they do than the ones I had 5 years ago. And adept, what I mean by that was they're not better players. They're just better personalities on stage, which can deliver the songs and the story.
That's incredible. Well, Alan, your story is amazing. Your journey has been, surreal to see from the outside and to, I guess, experience a little bit through this conversation and through your performances. And, we can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Thank you for this moment with you. This is really nice. It's nice to, and I don't want to seem real Marcellus here, what it is, but it's nice to talk to men of letters for a change. It really is. it really. I'm
appreciate
serious.
that.
I'm serious
I
because
appreciate
usually
that.
when you do on these, when I do interviews, whatever, I'm usually dragging the interviewer along because they're set into one sort of format. This is nice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What an incredible opportunity that was for us to talk to somebody who is such a master of their craft, whatever the craft may be, to be so deep and have so much experience, but to talk to an artist of that caliber was really quite the experience. Tushar is somebody who is also a passionate musician, similar to Larry Shea, as we talked about off the top. Now, what are your takeaways from that conversation?
I'll tell you this. I was surprised by a couple of things. One, obviously, was the journey from the young musician and this notion of having his worst moment and his best moment kind of being almost the same thing. Being thrown off stage by a mentor and then being kind of called back on stage by that same mentor relatively soon afterwards, and being told, "Look, you have to improve." It takes a lot of guts to, first of all, get thrown off stage and then understand what you did wrong, and then have the courage to return and say, "Okay, I can redeem myself," right? So it takes a lot of courage to do that. And we talk about courage a lot on this when we're doing the podcast. So it takes a lot of courage to do that. But the one thing that really struck me was, he's become something of I don't want to say reluctant, but he's become a mentor by default in some ways, right? That he feels this obligation to mentor the younger generation of artists out there. And not everyone has to do that. Not everyone feels they need to do that, but he feels that he has a real calling, that he has to do this because, as he said, that a lot of this younger generation of musician, although they have a lot of skill, they seem to have the value system in some ways might have gone a little bit awry. That's what really struck me.
Yeah, you mentioned a bunch of interesting stuff there, specifically getting kicked off stage when he was, first starting out. That could have devastated and put a wall up in front of any other,
It probably would have devastated a lot of people.
I mean, what
right?
a difficult, learning lesson this guy had so early on in his career. And it could have gone a number of different ways. But it does seem like in the conversation, he talks a lot about how a lot of those obstacles seem to be his inspiration for just getting better, right? To just finding himself and his heart and where he wanted to go as a musician. And I think there is that eureka moment as an artist where you do have to figure out. I mean, he talked about the Pat Metheny stuff. He was never going to have the chops that certain guys had, right? But he knew how to do what he did well. And boy, did he. I mean, look what he's become. But it just goes to show you don't have to shred like Pat Metheny. You don't have to, sing like so-and-so. You just have to find what you do as an artist. That's what art is, right? It's looking within yourself. And he talked so much about it. Looking within yourself and finding what it is that you do well and what you can entertain people with. What's going to last. And when people think of you as an artist, what will give them that feeling of wholeness, right? Like, damn, like this guy knows exactly who he is, and he just rocked my world. And when I talk to Allan Harris, that's how I feel. He rocked my world. It was wonderful.
Yeah, and picking up on that, I think a little bit about the stage presence aspect, meaning how do you find your voice? How do you, work your way into the crowd? How do you learn to work a room? And the story of tipping the lead waiter in a bar or a restaurant to get a feel or a vibe.
So smart.
It was incredible.
How did he refer to it? The fragrance of the room. What did he refer? It was beautiful, right?
Exactly,
it was
right.
So great.
But that trade craft and to figure out how to do stuff like that. I mean, this is a veteran who we just spoke to who was nice enough to share some of the tricks of the trade. So, what an incredible opportunity for us. And we hope that all of you enjoyed the conversation just as much as we did. Allan, thank you so much for joining us on No Wrong Choices. For those of you out there who want to get to know Allan better, check out his website at allanharris.com, and I encourage you to listen to 2 recent albums, Allan Harris Live at Blue Llama and Kate's Soul Food. They're really great. On behalf of Tushar Saxena, Larry Shea, and me, Larry Samuels, thank you again for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. If after listening you've thought of someone who could be a great guest, please let us know by sending us a note via the contact page of our website at norwrongchoices.com. While there, please be sure to check out our blog and explore other great episodes while signing up to become a member of our community. You can also follow us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Threads, and X. TikTok is up and content has begun rolling out. We'll be back with new episodes in early February, leading in with a group of highly accomplished women, a CEO, super doctor, and Broadway production stage manager for some very popular shows. In advance of that, always remember, there are no wrong choices on the road to success, only opportunities, because we learn from every experience.